Everyone, today's webinar, we are going to give a few minutes to folks to join. So until then, you get a look at our beautiful faces as we wait for participants to arrive. We're getting to be old pros at the Zoom stuff, aren't we, this year? It's a new talent we've all developed.
Yeah, yep, all day.
Okay, just going to give people one more minute. All right. All right, well, let's get this party started, shall we? You all ready? We have three additional folks on the video today. We also have one on the phone. They'll each introduce themselves, but I am thrilled that all of you are here today to learn how to tame the mobility beast. I'm Amanda Prochaska, and I have the wonderful privilege of moderating the panel today. And but before we get into introductions, I did want to thank the sponsors for today's webinar, Eclipse, an industry-leading technology consulting firm, and their mobility management partner, vMOX, are delivering industry-leading patented technology solutions that help clients save 20 to 40% off of their mobility spend without changing providers, which is a big plus in the procurement world if you don't have to change providers, and you don't have to disrupt your service or change your billing, all while streamlining day-to-day management tasks. So we're so grateful for the sponsors today to talk about this really relevant topic that's impacting all of us in the world that we're living in today. So with that said, I would love, look at people are already chatting. Thanks for joining, Rob and Eric. This is a great session. So we're just going to dive right into it. And the way that I like to do this is that when we start off with the first question, each panelist will have the opportunity to introduce yourselves. So you get to learn a little bit about who's on the phone today. So Sarah, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind. And we're talking about taming a mobility beast, but why is this beast so hard to tame?
Sure, yeah. So Sarah Levine here. I'm with Eclipse. I've been with Eclipse for just about a year, but I've been in the tech and telecom and service provider space for almost a decade now. So I can tell you all about mobility. Mobility is a tough one. So it's not exempt or immune from any of the challenges with any technology initiatives. You guys are very familiar, I'm sure the audience is very familiar with how hard it can be. You know, you spend a ton of time vetting vendors, figuring out how you want the project to go. Once you find a vendor you like, you negotiate the contracts. It's a battle, and it takes a long time. Mobility is all of that plus more. So there are actually hundreds of different mobility plans that can change depending on the user, how you're using your cell phone or your device. And unless someone is watching every single device, every single day for every single user and putting them on the right plan, you're going to be overspending. So it's just really tough to watch and control. People have entire teams, companies, I should say, have entire teams of people just to do this. So, and it's even, there's no way to perfect it on your own. Not only that, but employee turnover. You know, large organizations naturally have people coming and going every day. You get seasonal workers, you know, schools are starting up, things like that. So someone has to like manually make sure that those cell phones are appropriate for that user. And it's really tough to do all day, every day.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is Katie's like, I'm living this. I
see her nodding.
And I'm sure so many people on the phone today, they either were thinking about mobility before all of this happened, the pandemic happened, and we all now are relying so much on mobility solutions. But Katie, I would love to turn it to you to ask you, when did you realize that you needed a mobility solution, and why did you need one?
Yeah, so my name's Katie Lowe. I work for Leggett & Platt. We are a diversified manufacturing company. Probably our most well-known products are adjustable bed frames. So if you have one of those, we probably made it. And we make a lot of other random component parts. We like to say that anything you use every day, we probably made something in it. So we're kind of got a lot of manufacturing locations, and that kind of plays into the whole mobility spectrum. You know, we've got drivers that have cell phones. We have salespeople that have cell phones. We've got, you know, office managers and corporate staff that have cell phones. So kind of across the board, it's wild. But yeah, I was nodding when Sarah was talking because it really is complicated. And so for us, you know, we had a team of 3 people who was working on cell phones. So pretty much primarily one person who was responsible for that all of the time. And I was not that person, but one of the girls on my team was. And unfortunately, due to COVID, we lost 2 of those 3. So I am the only one left. And now I am responsible for ordering phones, managing the whole process. And I think it really was Eclipse bringing vMOX to our understanding and knowledge, where we could say, okay, yeah, we need some help here. And thankfully, we started that process before COVID hit. So before we lost those 2 team members, you know, we were already on this process to get started with vMOX. So really thankful for the timing there. It's definitely been helpful to just get that process started now that I'm the only one on the team. But I imagine that our company is not alone. I've been with Leggett for 3 years, and I started out ordering cell phones. So now I'm kind of back to what I was doing when I started. But definitely looking forward to engaging more with vMOX and getting some help there. So that's one way it's benefiting us right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Laith, it's my understanding that you've been with vMOX for a little bit longer than Katie has, but I understand in the marketplace, and I was over IT long ago in my procurement world, and one of the big debates was always bring your own device. And not that this is already not complicated enough.
Right.
Bring your own device complicate things, or does it increase the need for a mobility solution?
So those are all good questions. I mean, everybody just, first of all, I'm Laith Mirza. I'm the Director of IT Procurement for Stericycle, Inc. We are a medical waste recycling company and and we also own Shred-it. So, you know, just garbage is our business. And, you know, and we have the same. We have our company's made up mostly of drivers, cell phones, handheld devices. And then Stericycle itself is a company that grew through acquisition. So over 30 years, they bought over 500 different companies. And it's a unique company in a sense that there's a huge digital transformation effort going on. So a lot of the things like vMOX and so on made total sense for us. And I'll get back to that for a second in a minute. But in my history as a procurement director, I supported IT for the last 10, 15 years. And, you know, from the outside looking in, everybody can be like, yeah, BYOD, why not? That's real simple. Just have everybody bring their own device and we'll pay them a stipend and that's that. Well, we all know it's not that simple. Maybe that's something that was cost beneficial 10, 15 years ago, but with the advancement of technology and the ability to leverage volumes and really negotiate the lowest data cost point. I mean, just to give you an example, and I'm not saying this is ours, but if you can get a data plan for $20, you're going to go to BYOD and pay somebody a $35 stipend. And now you're going to have your IT folks have to navigate through supporting a variety of different cell phones across the company, and whether or not they're supposed to support them, at the end of the day, that person is going to call that help desk to say, hey, my Samsung phone's broken. What should I do? You know, you have to service those folks. And on top of that, it's also, you run into legalities from state to state to state, like, for instance, California, Nevada. A lot of these states have real hard rules around people using their own devices and tax implications or salary implications and whatnot. So we looked at it, and I came from Tyson previously, and we had it, and it worked well. But they were going away from it. So at Stericycle, we took a look at the analysis, and at the end of the day, the cost benefit wasn't. It was kind of a push, and we're like, okay, do we want to create this monster of doing this thing for a push benefit, or do we want to go with a company like vMOX that has all this great technology, and we have been able to negotiate really good rates with our cell phone providers, and then build a policy around. It's more of a, at the end of the day, it's more of an issuing of a phone policy. Like Stericycle had you work here, you get a cell phone. Well, no, let's take a look at that and let's streamline that process and issue the phones where they need to be issued so we can get some cost benefit there and manage less phones. And let's find a company that has a technology that we need to help us leverage more benefits.
Oh yeah, that totally. So and next up is Mike, but we actually did receive a question from the audience, and I warned my panelists up front that we would take questions from the audience. So please keep on bringing them in. Rob has a question for us about security. So what has been the biggest security challenge with mobility in this new normal, and how has it been addressed for either Sarah, the customers, or Mike, your customers on vMOX, or Katie, Laith? Feel free to talk about your own experience, but security challenges.
Sure. I mean, I can kind of start it off and people can add in. It's tough. Everyone is on their own network at home. Every device, so many more devices were added in to the work network, so to say, to add it into the environment. All the applications are now on each user's personal cell phone, or a lot of people have two different cell phones. They're using them back and forth interchangeably. So it's tough, and it's something we could have a whole separate 5-hour-long seminar on security if you guys want. It's very important. But it's been tough to manage, and having the right people in the right positions within the organizations, or bringing in partners like Eclipse to work with those people, it's really needed at this point, because everyone hears those horror stories of, this guy got in through this user's cell phone, this person clicked on the wrong link. Like, it happens daily. It happens all the time. vMOX does have a lot of procedures and policies in place for security. Mike, I don't know if you want to touch on those right now. That would be a... Yeah.
Well, I'll almost maybe take it a different angle, because although security is important, and I'd recommend any organization, whether they have individual liable or corporate liable phones, should be considering and likely leveraging a mobile device management platform or MDM platform. Realize vMOX is not an MDM platform, so we're agnostic when it comes to that. We work alongside all of them. Just from some industry trends, we're for sure seeing Microsoft Intune taking over mobile device management in pretty much every corporation. I mean, and pretty much seems like every company we talk to today is either evaluating Intune or migrating to it. So it's a necessity. There should be a policy around it. There should likely be a platform. But a little different spin on it than security that I think organizations should be thinking about. And I know the companies here on the phone, because we've dealt with some of these issues with them and going through sort of the contracting process, is around data security and data privacy. In the last 30, 60, 90 days, there's been very significant changes in terms of data privacy. What is sort of considered PII, what isn't, how is that data protected? If employees of a company that have a mobile device are getting specific data and information, that could now fall under some of these new updated privacy laws. And so ensuring that you have a mobile device management platform policy and practice, properly containerizing devices, making sure that if an employee leaves, you're locking and wiping the devices, ensuring that devices are secure if they get stolen, et cetera. I think is critical to any organization, whether they're managing a corporately owned, individual owned, or they hybrid approach to it. So great question. I would agree. We could probably spend a whole nother 5 hours talking about it. But I would also say every company should be talking to their legal teams, not just about security, but about data privacy and some of the changes that have happened recently, because it's a critical thing that should be top of mind for every organization today.
All right. And thanks, Mike. I know you're not on video today, but would you mind, we're going to get an introduction for you, but then the next question was actually one that I wanted to ask you about. From your perspective, obviously you've helped so many people be successful in taming the mobility beast through vMOX. So what issues are your clients typically seeing, and how does vMOX solve for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and apologize everybody for not making on the video. We had a slight technical mix-up, but thanks for listening to my voice. I'll do a quick intro. My name's Mike Saxby. I'm the Vice President of vMOX, and we work with the Eclipse team and obviously Leif, Cassie, quite extensively. So we see a variety of different issues. I'm going to highlight a handful of them. Right now, top issue or priority that we see coming from organizations is really around digitizing workflows, right? So looking at IT teams, looking at their processes, looking at things that are done very manually. So if you take the management of a corporate mobile environment and you think about what would be all of those day-to-day transactions, activating devices, disconnecting devices, assisting and enrolling in MDM, suspending lines, upgrading lines, et cetera, a vast majority of those transactions, if not almost all of them in most corporations, are done manually. And they're not high value transactions. Taking a ticket out of a ticket management or ITSM platform like ServiceNow and having a help desk agent swivel chair that over to the Verizon portal and spend 15, 20, 30 minutes per transaction doesn't create any value for an IT organization. In addition, IT organizations are stretched. They're supporting more users from home. More users are working, with mobile type devices. And so there's a lot more demand and there's a lot less resources. So probably the biggest pain point and where we help companies in today's environment is truly digitizing those workflows. So leveraging our software and our integrations that we have to take those processes and fully automate them, and also creating bidirectional communication between carrier systems like AT&T and Verizon and companies' systems like ServiceNow, Jira, Sharewell, et cetera. So automation of process and digitizing workflows is what we would consider to be a key and critical thing that we're really seeing as a challenge and pain point today. And also when doing that, you are creating a more efficient process. Your employees are having a better experience. You are reducing errors. And then, the IT team that is now stretched can go do other functions that are high value to the organization. So there are many others, but I'll just leave that as that's kind of we hear that 90% of the time on every phone call we get onto on a daily basis.
Yeah, so from the looks of a lot of our attendees today have procurement backgrounds, so it'd be a great way to introduce the solution to IT to solve a need for them, obviously a pain point for the IT organization, but then also have a better control over your mobility spend. So it sounds like a great win-win for everyone involved, and to help build that stronger relationship with your IT stakeholders. So sounds good.
Absolutely.
Katie, you had the opportunity. Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, and also helping to do things, as Leif mentioned, of enforcing policies and ensuring policies are being followed based on the guidelines of the organization, looking at the data and going, are there a mismatch with policies, right? Are there areas where we can leverage technology to ensure that we are, acting more responsibly? But all of that is above and beyond. And I think Leif pointed it out in his comments of, as a procurement person, this is above and beyond that cost savings of being able to go into that existing Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, Rogers, Bell environment and reduce the billing and reduce the cost, right? That's typically a a major win for procurement. So in this, I feel like a multifaceted approach where there are benefits from a procurement side, there's benefits from an IT side, and there's a really good way for procurement and IT to align on these benefits and create value within sort of both divisions or organizations within a company.
Yep, absolutely. And Katie, you had that opportunity to offer this solution within your organization. So I was always curious because I know that there are mobility solution providers out there, but you through Eclipse, they helped you find the right solution for your needs. So can you tell us a little bit about how that all came together?
Yeah, so we started working with Eclipse late last year. We had several contracts coming due this year that we were not prepared for. Our IT and procurement teams really work together on contracts with suppliers for landline phones, cell phones, all that jazz. So pretty much everything telecom we try to work on as a team. And we felt from the procurement side that we didn't really have anyone with expertise in the contract negotiation side. And so we engaged Eclipse with that. And they presented us with a lot of cost savings opportunities that they thought might benefit our company after we gave them some of our invoices to look at and contracts to look at. And one of them was vMOX. And, we'd had a lot of calls and inquiries from other suppliers that do similar things to vMOX, but navigating that when you don't really understand it well enough to feel like you are on the same page as the vendor when you join a phone call or get a cold call. I think for us, the initial reaction was, oh, we don't really need that. We don't have the time to set that up. We don't have the understanding to make sure we're really going to get cost savings here. Just navigating that was really hard. So I think the benefit for us having Eclipse kind of have this one option in front of us that they'd vetted, they'd done all the research for us. They had connections, and we got immediately connected with Mike. We're able to see, wow, this really is going to save us a lot of money and make our lives easier. And like I said earlier, thankfully, we started to make those decisions and get started on this process a long time before it really was something that we needed to push hard on, because now it's almost vital that we get this totally up and running, because I can't perform the job of 3 people by myself. And so this will definitely help relieve a lot of that pressure. And I'm just thankful we kind of were able to see one really good option that someone else had taken the time to vet that has more knowledge than our department did. And that's been a really good thing for us. Less for us to dig through. I know that's everyone's, probably pain point in procurement is when you do an RFP, all the research goes into finding the right vendors to include, and we didn't have to do that piece. And that did save us a lot of time and got us moving in the right direction much faster. And thankfully, that was good timing, because who knew this was all going to happen by March. So,
right, great timing on your part. So Sarah, I get playing off of Katie's response there. I'm sure you're a technology consultant, right? That's what you do. There's a ton of technologies out there. So why do you recommend vMOX to clients like Katie?
Yeah. Where do I start? So specifically right now, I mean, Katie hit the nail on the head. All organizations are looking for ways to recoup from the first half of the year. Most places are in a downward spike as opposed to an upward spike. So people need savings quickly right now. That's kind of, we're really happy we actually have vMOX in our suite of services. I should say we work with other mobility solutions as well, but we like vMOX the best. They're simply the best. So we're lucky that we have them to be able to offer to our clients and say, hey, look at this solution. It's not only going to help, maybe reallocate, Katie, like you said, 3 people or whoever that solely do this, over to other things that they need to do. But typically within a month, it can turn around like a 30% savings. And it doesn't impact your existing contracts. It doesn't impact your service, as opposed to other technologies where, hey, we can replace your internet circuits for less money. You'll get some savings. There's going to be a downtime. Your users are going to have to get used to this. Your IT guys are going to have to change this. There's none of that. So unless you want to change your contracts, you don't have to in this case. So it's just a really great, easy, quick way for companies to recoup some costs after what happened this first half of the year, or anytime, even if it didn't happen. Who doesn't want cost savings all the time? And just, and again, in Katie's situation, sometimes people have to let staff go because of what's happened. So this is a great way to just kind of reallocate resources to what they can focus on, to their expertise, kind of get them off of that administrative work of keeping Excel spreadsheets for who needs what cell phone when and why and that sort of thing. That doesn't require a whole body at this point.
Right.
So that's why we like bringing this solution to our clients, particularly now after what happened this year, just focusing on this really quick, easy cost saver.
That makes complete sense. So Laith, we like to keep it real here. Like on all of the panels that I lead, we like to get kind of a reality check going on. So I wanted to ask you something about, because you've been on vMOX for a while now, and I would love for you to share some lessons learned about the deployment. Like Sarah was just saying, it's super easy. Were there any lessons learned where you're like, I should have thought of this or that? And then what were the benefits that you received actually from the implementation?
So again, Stericycle unique. We already had a third-party wireless management company, and it was a small company out of Texas. And so I'm happy to say, from a lessons learned perspective, it was a very smooth transition to Mind Wireless. I mean, being the procurement guy, we negotiate the deal, we put it in place, this and that, and then your infrastructure guys pick up from there. And my rule of thumb is I'm not hearing any whining out of my infrastructure guys. Things are good. So I didn't hear a peep out of those guys. So at the end of the day, every time I did speak to them, they would just look at me and be like, wow, you were right. And I'm like, yeah, I know I was right. So, I mean, from that perspective, kudos to vMOX, because they're very, very well put together and they have very well informed folks that work for them. And they really made it very seamless. A big plus for us is we were able to leverage them on a side note to help us negotiate our wireless contracts too. And it wasn't any cost to us at all. They have experts there that collaborated with us in procurement to get us the best possible deal. So, from a lessons learned perspective, I wish we'd have done it sooner, right? Okay. Versus having to wait so long. All
right. So Mike, I'm sure this is, you're like, okay, yeah, that sounds pretty consistent with the other clients that I've had. I'm hoping that that's the case for you, but I'm sure there's a huge list of benefits that we could go through today from installing vMOX at various companies. And we've already heard some today, but I would like to ask you about resource reallocation as a particular benefit. I know Katie already mentioned that she had a reduction in headcount. I'm sure some others on the phone today have had similar situations. So can you go through what that benefit typically looks like for your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of almost plays off of the last question. So one of the initial ways, and I won't talk about it a lot because I already did, is that resource allocation is taking anything today that's done manual and automating it. That said, in full transparency, not every customer, based on where they're at in their own digital transformation, is ready for that. And so a lot of our resource allocation on a customer by customer basis can be us taking on that workload that still needs to be done manually. So as a, for example, vMOX operates a tier 1 24/7 wireless help desk. And so for many of our customers where, they're in that, digital transformation, but not there as it relates to mobility just yet, we can take on those phone calls from those end employees that are working from home, need a device troubleshoot, need help enrolling, or, maybe there's a move from one MDM to another. So they need to de-enroll one provider, re-enroll the next one. And, it's a bit of a technical type thing that some employees might be challenged to do. So that's an example of resource allocation. We also have what we call as forward and reverse logistic services. Many companies today are warehousing physical devices on their own premises. One of the main reasons why we're seeing warehousing devices right now is because the carriers are commonly out of stock, right? For those normal stock devices, because there's such a great demand for them, they're running out of stock. So a lot of companies are bulk buying hundreds of iPhones at a time and wanting to store them at a warehouse. Well, if that warehouse, and use warehouse at least loosely from a customer perspective, is the IT department. The IT department has to bring those devices in. They have to identify them. They have to make sure that they're loaded in the inventory management system so it can be used during procurement, right? They have to manage that inventory. And then when that inventory is ready to be used, they have to stage it, kit it, they have to pick it, pack it, ship it, and get it out to those end employees. Those are functions that vMOX takes on for some of our companies. Or if an employee is leaving the organization and that device is of good quality and can be reused, or even if it needs to be recycled, being able to ship that device out to vMOX and have us evaluate the device, clean it, wipe it, maybe stick it back into inventory to reuse it or send it out for recycling. So those are just some of the very specific examples of what we would call is the ability to, reallocate resources, because that work takes bodies within an IT organization today. And as much as we want to go into a company and optimize every process that we can, we also realize that not every company is ready to do that, or there are use cases where they don't want it to be fully, digitized, and they need some direct engagement with employees, equipment, et cetera.
Okay. Well, those are great examples. And I'm sure that, like I mentioned earlier, the people on the phone today, or the people that are going to be watching this as a recording, probably are getting pressured on how can we optimize our resources moving forward. So this is obviously a great benefit through this type of deployment. So Katie, being newer on vMOX and going through all of this just recently, right in time for COVID to be happening, there are probably people on the phone today that are considering this type of solution. What advice would you have for them if they're just starting this journey?
Yeah, so a couple things that I think we kind of ran into at the beginning. Kind of felt like, when you have like a cleaning service, some people have a cleaning service come into their house, and they always talk about how I feel like I have to clean my whole house before they come, because I don't want them to clean up my real mess, only some of my mess. And so I think from our standpoint, we felt like that a little bit, like we really needed to organize all the numbers, make sure all the numbers were tied to the right employee. I think all big companies struggle with this when you have people that are leaving, and especially in a situation like we've had this year where we had a lot of people leave all kind of at once, because unfortunately that was the situation. It just got messy. Like there was no way to control that. I mean, we try our best to line all the numbers up with all the employees, but sometimes things happen and people trade phones and numbers and it gets wild. So that being said, we kind of felt like we needed to clean things up, and we're actually still working through a process with vMOX where we went through and we got all of the lines kind of organized as best we could. But they're going to help us even further with that and take some of that off our hands and not make us clean our mess up before we can use them. And they're kind of helping us right now with some cancellation recommendations. They can run a report on 0 usage lines, and we're working through that right now, getting those canceled, removed from service, figuring out what we need and what we don't need. So I'm working with managers on that throughout the company. Another cool thing is they do this SMS campaign where they can send a text to each phone number, and it pulls up this information form that an employee would have to fill out with their email and their name, and it kind of ties each phone to that employee. And then you know for sure that employee has that phone. And so some of those things where you think you need to clean the data up yourself before they can really help you be efficient with it, they've actually taken that off our hands, where it's going to make it a lot easier of a process to get started with. So that's just a simple example of something that we ran into where we kind of felt like we were going to have to organize it all ourselves, but they have a lot of tools, I think, that make this a little bit easier. And you don't really know that going in all the time. You get the big picture of cost savings and organization to ordering, and you get excited about those elements, but there's a lot of small things that they're doing for us that make a big impact. So we're looking forward to diving in even more and continuing. And I think that's the first step for us, is getting the huge list of numbers and phones and everything organized. And then we can kind of make decisions from there on plan changes. And I mean, they're doing all that for us. So it's literally no work for us to optimize things. And that's so I think Blake said it perfectly. The sooner the better. I wish we would have done this a long time ago, because it's going to be a benefit for us in the long term.
You got some comments on your example. So of the cleaning team that comes, my kid, not to digress on that, but my kids always ask me if we could get a cleaning team that could come in and pre-clean our house before the actual cleaning team comes in to clean it up. But it's a great example and great analogy to what vMOX can do to help you do that upfront cleaning. So you don't feel like you have to do it all on your own. And they have some great solutions that you gave as examples to help you do that. So Laith, it seems like you have a really close relationship with IT, but that might not be the case for some of our people on the phone today. And in my,
it's a love-hate relationship, just like most of the folks, I'm sure. They love to hate us. They love to hate us.
Yeah. So in my experience, this area of mobility and telecom was always very highly guarded by IT. How did you go about getting IT on board with deploying a mobility management solution?
So, I mean, in Stericycle's case, we had a CIO that was very unique, and his strategy was to manage less stuff. He'd literally say that to us. I don't want to be in the business of managing stuff. I want to manage less stuff. So from a procurement perspective, we were going through a total digital transformation effort these last 3 years of the company, and opportunities were ripe to focus in areas like this to see how can we streamline, how can we manage less stuff, like the CIO says. And I came in 2018. They already had a wireless management company, but it was a very manual process still, so they weren't seeing any benefit. And so that was even harder to get them to look at, well, maybe you might want to change that. So it was even harder than to trying to introduce it all together. But what won them over, I mean, in procurement, the data tells the truth, right? At the end of the day, it's all about the data. And I got them to agree to have vMOX do an analysis. And then when they saw the results, they were eye-opening. And on top of that, vMOX has that patented algorithm that goes into your wireless provider's network and on a daily basis adjusts in real time to the best possible data plan for each of the cell phones. And most of these other wireless providers are very manual and drive it off of spreadsheets. And you don't realize that savings till a month or 60 or 90 days later. And do you even realize it because you're relying on them to call and make the changes? So that was, once they saw that kind of stuff in a few meetings, I had the SVP of IT infrastructure like, yeah, let's get these guys in here. These guys are good. And he went to the CIO, pounded his chest and said, look at what I brought to you. Look what I bring to you, So it wasn't, the data is where it's at, really. I mean, to these potential customers, I would say you have nothing but benefit to do free analysis. I mean, somebody just comes in, all they need to do is tap into your wireless provider's networks, and in about a week or so, they'll show you a report that says, here's what we could do for you.
Yeah.
And that drives the conversation.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like it. The data always speaks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it helps tell the story. That's for
Absolutely.
sure. So, So congratulations on getting that done. And I know, Katie, it sounds like you've been successful in doing that too. So kudos to you. Mike, I wanted to ask a question for you about, we talked about cost optimization, we talked about resource allocation, and Katie also touched on a little bit about the pure management of devices. And both of the examples we have on the phone here, if they have a lot of drivers, and I'm sure that's hard to manage. So can you go into how vMOX, beyond maybe some of the examples that Katie already mentioned, and just the pure management of devices?
Yeah, absolutely. And, gosh, as I'm sitting here listening to this call, I'm kind of blushing a bit. So Katie and Lace, thank you first and foremost for all of the kind comments. Yeah, in any enterprise organization of size and scope, management of devices takes work and effort. I mean, just in full transparency, if you're a corporation and you have 20 devices, well, there's not going to be a lot of management because there's not going to be a lot of requests. Once you get to a certain size and scope, that management takes on a lot of workload. And as Katie mentioned, one of the biggest challenges with that for some organizations is that you might have one individual that's assigned to doing that. Well, if that one individual doesn't come to work that day, or they're out sick for a couple of days, or their kids are out sick, all of a sudden people are scrambling to manage through that process. So kind of just by the very nature of the size and scale and scope, those types of things don't happen when we're managing a customer, right? We have hundreds of enterprise customers. We have significant expertise, right? We work with the wireless carriers every single day. We work on the same issues. And so just that knowledge base and expertise allows to create a consistent and improved experience for an organization that is a managed service, where a company is not having to allocate resources for the management of devices. So that's kind of the main way that I really think about this is, and this doesn't apply just to mobility. Typically in any sort of area, once an organization gets to a certain scale and size, there can always be a benefit to bringing in a subject matter expert to manage that process, because just like in Stericycle's case, they wanted to get out of the business of managing today and wanted to be more in the business of managing what it is that they do for a living. And I think that that's a very common thing that we're seeing across organizations, just trying to be more lean and mean, right? I think every company today is going, well, our business is to make this product or sell this product or deliver this service. We're not in the business of managing Verizon, right? And so it's just a shift in thinking, and then looking out to the marketplace and going, are there subject matter experts that can do this at a greater efficiency than what's being done today? So hopefully that's a helpful answer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to let everyone know that's on the phone today, or on the Zoom session, that we're going to open it up for questions here in a second. So please be thinking of any questions that you might have for the group. We did lose Laith, but he did notify me it wasn't like a technology issue or anything like that. He got called into an emergency meeting, so by his leadership, so he had to head out. But as people are thinking of their questions, Sarah, just to wrap up, if people are listening today who are interested in learning more, how do they go about learning more about this solution?
Sure. I guess the easiest, quickest way I would say is go to vMOX.com. There's a ton of information on there for you, or get a hold of us. You can email me at Sarah, that's SARAH, as it says on the screen, at eclipse-telecom.com. Mike's email is msaxby, that's MSAXBY, at vMOX.com. Get a hold of us on LinkedIn, any of the above. So Laith mentioned the free analysis. That's also a really easy thing to do. It takes 5 to 10 minutes of your time. We just need bill copies for your mobile providers, and then what's called a raw data file that we can send instructions on how to get. You can get it through your provider's portal online. It's just as easy as pulling an invoice. So it's really easy to do. They turn it around within a couple days, and it shows what you can save and what they can do for you.
Okay. Perfect. All right, let's open it up to questions. Anyone have any questions for this panel today about mobility or telecom, et cetera? Let's see if we have anyone that's, no, Rob's not bashful. How about Anna? Maybe if you have any questions. Okay, let's see if we have any. And if not, we might wrap up early.
If it's helpful, this is Mike from vMOX. I'll add something. I think maybe on a follow up to what both Leif and Katie said in the process in terms of around what does it take to implement a solution like this? And I realize for those of you on the call having never engaged us before, meaning vMOX. A simple, easy, painless onboarding of a new solution that's a managed service. Probably most people are going, well, that sounds too good to be true, right? And because if I were you, I would be thinking the same thing. I think one of the interesting follow-ups there is to explain some of the reasonings of why. Why is this a not only fast, but low effort process on behalf of both IT and procurement. And the main reason why is all of the integrations that we've built and the technology that we've built apply from one customer to the next. So, as we're engaging Leggett or Stericycle, the process and what they need to do is exactly the same. The integrations already exist, and all they're really doing is approving us as a third party to act on their behalf. Because everything's already done. So it on the outside, probably looking in, you might look at that and go, oh gosh, that sounds too good to be true. Spend some time, either with, some of the other panelists asking some of those questions and specifics, or engage with us, and we can walk through the process of it. Because I could realize if I was a panelist sitting there going, gosh, think about all the managed services we've implemented in the organization over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And man, this one had this headache and this one had this obstacle. And not that there aren't challenges with any implementation, but it's amazing when you kind of narrow it down to, well, what are the minimum requirements? It really is just giving us authorization, because all of the work that we do on your behalf is stuff that is already pre-set up. We just have to have the approval to work on a company's behalf in order to, provide and start that scope of work. So I know that wasn't a specific question, but might just provide some clarity to some of the earlier comments.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we actually received 2 questions while you were mentioning that great point. So there is a question from the audience around, when does it make sense to start thinking about a solution like this? So for instance, is it like, how many users do you need to have? How many devices do you need to have for this to start making sense in your organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. So usually around a couple hundred devices is where your billing is significant enough that the cost reduction from it would be meaningful to the organization, and also that you've got enough day-to-day activity. So, again, put yourself in sort of the customer shoes and looking at it from that pain point. I'd say usually around 200 or 300 is where it starts to become enough where you might want to consider looking at it. If you have 50 or 100 corporately owned devices and you're single carrier just with Verizon, the billing is not all that complex because there's only 100 devices and you're not getting a lot of transactions. You can usually look at the number of transactions a company gets as a percentage of the line count. So if you're getting 10 to 15% of the line count, you only have 100 lines, you're not getting a ton of activity in terms of new activations, disconnects, upgrades, et cetera. And then from a timing perspective, at least, from our viewpoint on this, because we are not changing or modifying in any way, shape, or form the relationship that you have with your incumbent provider, there is no good time or bad time. If you just recently signed a AT&T or Verizon agreement, it doesn't change really anything at all. If your agreement is out of contract, that's not good or bad. We slot in at any point in that solution. One could argue in the case of like Stericycle, as Leif mentioned, there can be some added benefits if we're, engaged right at the point that a contract's being negotiated, because we can leverage some of our benchmarking data to assist in that. But that said, the wireless carriers are hyper competitive these days. And even if you signed a brand new agreement with, say, Verizon, 6 to 8 months later, you can already negotiate an addendum and work to improve on some of those terms and conditions, even if it's a 2-year agreement. So, wireless kind of operates a little bit differently than some other term-based. So also from a timing perspective, there really is no good or bad time.
Yeah. So one other question that came in, and Mike, this probably will go back to you, although Katie, it might be an interesting answer too. When you look at the cost savings range that was quoted earlier, which was between 20 and 40%, what are the main drivers of those percentages? So are you going to get the max value out of a particular cost reduction strategy with you, or is it different per client?
I'll start off, and then Katie, if you want to add in any, because obviously you went through that process with us, if you kind of want to validate or verify or change anything I'm about to say, it does vary from customer to customer for sure, because every environment is different. Every environment has different variations and changes in usage, different mixes of device types, different policies around when people can upgrade. So when devices are either not or out of contract. Definitely organizations have different mixes of folks that travel abroad, although right now not a concern, but in near-term future will come back. So it does vary. That said, the vast majority of the cost savings that we deliver to our customers from a billing perspective, not from process automation, but solely from a billing perspective, is around optimizing the billing plans each and every bill cycle based on consumption. So to get ultra specific about what I mean by that is, most organizations today operate in what's called a shared or pooled data environment. So every line of service gets a 5 gigabyte plan, it contributes to the pool and everybody shares. And so you're buying out of this pool. What vMOX is effectively doing each and every bill cycle is we are making sure that, one, you're buying the pool appropriately with the right plans, but we are also growing and shrinking the size of that data pool to match your consumption. Most companies buy 20, 30% more data than what they need because there's not a tool to effectively manage that during the bill cycle. Where with vMOX, we're literally monitoring that consumption during the bill cycle and making changes within the carrier's bill cycle to align what you consume with what you have purchased. And so if you kind of think about what we've gone through with COVID, I'd say 90% of the organizations that we manage today, when lockdown happened and people went to work from home, data consumption actually dropped. And so as their data consumption was dropping, rather than those companies each month paying and buying the same amount of data, we were shrinking their data pool. Now that organizations are sending people back out into the field, we're seeing that happen. We're seeing data consumption increase. We're buying up that data. So, and again, that's data pooling is one example. There are, of course, things like unlimited plans, and managing this is it's complex, which is why we've built a machine learning algorithm process. So use my example as just one specific example, but that's where the majority of the savings is coming from. There are additional savings components, like Katie mentioned, around things like unused devices, unnecessary features, unnecessary devices. We work, just to kind of give something that every company should be thinking about. We work with a lot of organizations that in many cases give out, say, both a smartphone and a hotspot. And, a lot of those companies right now are looking and going, well, it's more cost effective to tether off the device than have the employee with 2 devices, because the hotspot with the combo of the smartphone costs more than just having a smartphone with tethering. So there are other areas, but I would say broadly speaking across our customers that billing optimization is where 90% of the cost savings comes from. Okay. And then Katie, I would pass over to you and just say, on your personal experience, would that align?
Yeah, so we actually just got our first invoice from vMOX. So I'm in the process of getting that all set up with our AP department to make sure they get paid. So I'm interested to I know I got sent a bunch of documents with that invoice of cost savings. So I know that there's been a lot of work that the vMOX team has been doing to optimize all of our plans around data to make sure that, if we have people that aren't using that much data, they're using like a gigabyte or two each month, then they shouldn't be on a 10 gigabyte plan. They should be on a 3 gigabyte plan. But then we have users, oh my gosh, who use way more than you would think they would need to, over like 30 gigabytes a month. And those people really need to be put on an unlimited plan. So I've seen things here and there of vMOX kind of making those changes for us. And the nice thing about that is it's made for us. Like I haven't had to touch it and I haven't had to make those changes. And that can be a really tedious process. So they're definitely taking care of that. One thing I wanted to give color on, I mentioned these cancellation recommendations that vMOX has made based on devices that have zero usage, just so you can get a picture of this. In the last 2 months since we really started looking at this report, I have approved 87 cancellations for lines with zero usage. And that's around $2,500 per month that I won't have to pay anymore for those devices. And the scariest column on that one is the amount that we've been paying for months of zero usage. It's ridiculous. I mean, lines where we didn't have usage for 7 months and we paid $500, $600 during that time. And we didn't have the time to run reports like that and really dig in like that. So just that's a real world example of the kind of savings and kind of opportunity I think that something like this can help with if you don't have the kind of team that has the time to run reports. I mean, when you've got someone who's spending most of their day ordering phones or managing calls, from end users who are having issues with their device, they're spending most of their day doing that, and they might have enough time at the end of the month to run the bill and make sure no one's cost was outrageous that month, but they don't have the time to run those reports. And so I think this is a huge benefit. So that's one just example of what we've seen.
That you've been able to share such wonderful examples with us today. So I truly appreciate it, Katie. Yeah. Sarah, thank you so much for your insights. Mike and Laith, obviously he's not on anymore. I also appreciate all the questions that we received today. And so thank you again to our sponsors, vMOX and Eclipse, and have a wonderful day. We'll be posting this online too, so people can reflect back on it and hopefully use it to get a mobility solution in place. So thanks again. Have a wonderful day.